Part 2, Mindsets in the Classroom. Let's begin this section by looking at this cartoon. I'll give you a few seconds to read through it. This cartoon clearly illustrates the difference between fixed and growth mindsets and the two types of students you are likely to encounter in classrooms. Now we're going to look more closely at how these mindsets affect students in the classroom and the consequences of their beliefs. We're going to examine three aspects: goals in school, valuing effort, and reactions to failure. This is based on the work of Dr. Dweck and her colleagues. Let's begin with goals in school. A student with a fixed mindset tends to be interested only in looking smart and successful. For students with a fixed mindset, their goal in school is to show how smart they are. If you think you're born smart or dumb, you want to make sure that everyone knows you're smart. So this makes them much less likely to ask questions in class or seek out help from teachers or peers, because that would involve showing that they don't know something. Meanwhile, a growth mindset is interested in learning. They're more likely to ask a question if they don't understand, and are more likely to seek out help or try a new strategy if they're struggling. This slide again showcases the consequences and goals of these students. Students with a fixed mindset are more likely to agree with, "The main thing I want when I do my schoolwork is to show how good I am at it." Meanwhile, the growth mindset students are more likely to agree with a statement like, "It's much more important for me to learn things in my classes than it is to get the best grades." Next, let's look at effort. Think back to the cartoon. Students with a fixed mindset actually see effort as proof of low ability. They think that if you have to try hard, that means you aren't very smart. On the opposite side, the growth mindset student sees effort as how you grow your abilities. They value having to put time and effort into everything they do. Let's look at the consequences of valuing effort. A student with a fixed mindset is likely to say something like, "To tell the truth, when I work hard at my schoolwork, it makes me feel like I'm not very smart." They think that they shouldn't have to work hard. Meanwhile, the growth mindset student feels that effort is positive. They believe that the harder you work at something, the better you'll be at it. Now let's look at responses and reactions to failure. A fixed mindset student tends to have a helpless response to failure, and they don't like to struggle. They give up because they see setbacks as evidence that they don't have what it takes. A growth mindset student reacts to failure by working harder. Students with a growth mindset are more likely to work harder, put in more effort, and rise to the challenge. When we think about the two different responses to failure, a student who has a fixed mindset is likely to give up. They would spend less time on the subject from now on. They would try to take the subject never again, or they would try to cheat on the next test. Meanwhile, a growth mindset student is resilient and thinks, "I would work harder in this class from now on. I would spend more time studying for the test." Now let's look at perhaps the most powerful indicator: achievement. Students with a fixed mindset tend to show declines in their school performance over time, particularly when they transition into a new environment, such as from elementary to middle school or middle school to high school. Students with growth mindset typically show increases over time, again, having higher rates of achievement. This graphic showcases the important difference between fixed and growth mindsets. As pictured here, Students with a growth mindset have increased effort and therefore higher achievement. Meanwhile, students with a fixed mindset tend to have reduced effort over time and lower achievement overall. Now that we understand the importance of growth mindset in students, let's talk about how we can convert those fixed mindsets to growth mindsets. Keep in mind that growth mindset is not instant. It often takes a lot of time and effort to get students to think in a growth-minded way. This is also easier for younger students. Older students have been in fixed mindsets that become habits that are hard to break. Let's learn more by watching this video from Dr. Carol Dweck.
The power of yet. I heard about a high school in Chicago where students had to pass a certain number of courses to graduate, and if they didn't pass a course, they got the grade not yet. And I thought that was fantastic, because if you get a failing grade, you think, I'm nothing, I'm nowhere. But if you get the grade not yet, you understand that you're on a learning curve. It gives you a path into the future. Not yet also gave me insight into a critical event early in my career, a real turning point. I wanted to see how children coped with challenge and difficulty. So I gave 10-year-olds problems that were slightly too hard for them. Some of them reacted in a shockingly positive way. They said things like, I love a challenge, or, you know, I was hoping this would be informative. They understood that their abilities could be developed. They had what I call a growth mindset. But other students felt it was tragic, catastrophic. From their more fixed mindset perspective, their intelligence had been up for judgment, and they failed. Instead of luxuriating in the power of yet, they were gripped in the tyranny of now. So what do they do next? I'll tell you what they do next. In one study, they told us they would probably cheat the next time instead of studying more if they failed a test. In another study, after a failure, they looked for someone who did worse than they did so they could feel really good about themselves. And in study after study, they have run from difficulty. Scientists measured the electrical activity from the brain as students confronted an error. On the left, you see the fixed mindset students. There's hardly any activity. They run from the error. They don't engage with it. But on the right, you have the students with the growth mindset, the idea that abilities can be developed. They engage deeply. Their brain is on fire with yet. They engage deeply. They process the error. They learn from it, and they correct it. How are we raising our children? Are we raising them for now instead of yet? Are we raising kids who are obsessed with getting A's? Are we raising kids who don't know how to dream big dreams? Their biggest goal is getting the next A, or the next test score? And are they carrying this need for constant validation with them into their future lives? Maybe because employers are coming to me and saying, we have already raised a generation of young workers who can't get through the day without an award. So, what can we do? How can we build that bridge to yet? Here are some things we can do. First of all, we can praise wisely, not praising intelligence or talent. That has failed. Don't do that anymore, but praising the process that kids engage in. Their effort, their strategies, their focus, their perseverance, their improvement. This process praise creates kids who are hardy and resilient. There are other ways to reward yet. We recently teamed up with game scientists from the University of Washington to create a new online math game that rewarded yet. In this game, students were rewarded for effort, strategy, and progress. The usual math game rewards you for getting answers right now, but this game rewarded process. And we got more effort, more strategies, more engagement over longer periods of time, and more perseverance when they hit really, really hard problems. Just the words yet or not yet, we're finding, give kids greater confidence, give them a path into the future that creates greater persistence. And we can actually change students' mindsets. In one study, we taught them that every time they push out of their comfort zone to learn something new and difficult, the neurons in their brain can form new, stronger connections, and over time, they can get smarter. Look what happened. In this study, students who were not taught this growth mindset continued to show declining grades over this difficult school transition. But those who were taught this lesson showed a sharp rebound in their grades. We have shown this now, this kind of improvement, with thousands and thousands of kids, especially struggling students. So let's talk about equality. In our country, there are groups of students who chronically underperform. For example, children in inner cities or children on Native American reservations. And they've done so poorly for so long that many people think it's inevitable. But when educators create growth mindset classrooms steeped in yet, equality happens. And here are just a few examples. In 1 year, a kindergarten class in Harlem, New York, scored in the 95th percentile on the National Achievement Test. Many of those kids could not hold a pencil when they arrived at school. In 1 year, fourth grade students in the South Bronx, way behind, became the #1 fourth grade class in the state of New York on the state math test. In a year to a year and a half, Native American students in a school on a reservation went from the bottom of their district to the top. And that district included affluent sections of Seattle. So the Native kids outdid the Microsoft kids. This happened because the meaning of effort and difficulty were transformed. Before, effort and difficulty made them feel dumb, made them feel like giving up. But now, effort and difficulty, that's when their neurons are making new connections, stronger connections. That's when they're getting smarter. I received a letter recently from a 13-year-old boy. He said, "Dear Professor Dweck, I appreciate that your writing is based on solid scientific research, and that's why I decided to put it into practice. I put more effort into my schoolwork, into my relationship with my family, and into my relationship with kids at school, and I experienced great improvement in all of those areas. I now realize I've wasted most of my life." Let's not waste any more lives, because once we know that abilities are capable of such growth, it becomes a basic human right for children, all children, to live in places that create that growth, to live in places filled with yet. Thank you.
To summarize some of the main points displayed in the video, let's think about our growth mindset praise. This is a great strategy for encouraging growth mindsets. As educators, we can focus on effort and strategies that students use. For example, saying, "I like how you tried a new way to solve that problem." Even if the student doesn't get the answer correct, still praise the fact that they tried a new way to do something. We can also focus on abilities improving over time. For instance, if a student has been practicing handwriting, you might say, "You've been practicing and I can see it's paying off. Your handwriting has really gotten neater." By choosing to praise effort and strategies, abilities improving over practice, and by reinforcing that mistakes and challenges are a necessary part of learning, like saying, "I love mistakes because they're an opportunity to learn," are some of the best ways that we can encourage growth mindsets in our students. Here's another way that we can praise the process. Let's look at this table, and you can see how we can shift from person praise to process praise. Instead of saying, "Great job, you must be smart," try this instead. "Great job, you must have worked really hard." Pause the video for a few moments and read over the other 3 examples. Challenge yourself to try the growth mindset praise next time you're in the classroom. This is the end of section 2. Please complete the questions before moving on to the next section.